Is Ashes of Creation going to be for the hardcore few, or is it going to be for the many, many casuals that are out there? Now, we're talking about this because of a recent dev discussion that Intrepid have posted, and it's all about time dedication, what makes somebody a casual, what makes somebody an expert / hardcore player. Now, this is actually one of the topics close to my heart, and one that I've sort of already made a couple of videos about. So let's jump in, let's talk about this. Now, this is actually a concern that I have for the MMO genre just in general. And I think MMOs typically are going to struggle to balance the casual many and the hardcore few. Almost all MMOs that I've played have had a struggle with that kind of concept. I do not anticipate Ashes of Creation being any different in that regard. Some people might already be watching this being like, oh, well, casuals shouldn't play MMORPGs. Well, do you know what happens if your casuals don't play your game? Nobody ends up playing your game because it's not making enough profit and it's not getting enough content. The casuals are the many, and Stephen Sharif even admits this. But his hope is that the fact that there's a lot more casuals than hardcore players will mean that the casuals feel like they're contributing. Because whilst casuals can always play, will they actually feel valued? Stephen says this: traditionally in MMORPGs, you are going to see a larger population of casual players than you do of hardcore players. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles from a population standpoint. And because of that, and the way that nodes collect experience and advance as a result of player activity, those casual players will actually have more of an impact on node progression than hardcore players will. Now, we've not really spoke about the node system, we just dive straight into a very long quote by Stephen, but the node system is something that they're banking on having an impact with casuals. However, my last two videos, I think at this point, I had the concern whether or not the casuals will even interact with the node system in any meaningful way. And we'll talk about that in a minute. First, let's try and define casual versus hardcore, because that's going to go well. For me, you are a casual if you think you are a casual, and you are a hardcore player if you think you are a hardcore player. Barring some people who are completely delusional, I think that will generally hold up. Some people out there will think that somebody who spends 4 hours a night playing their favorite video game is actually a casual versus somebody who's playing 12 hours a night, without realizing that 4 hours a night from a casual point of view, somebody who maybe works, has a wife, a kid, a husband, whatever, right? 4 hours is actually quite a huge time investment. When you look at the amount of free time they have, that's almost all of it. So the hardcore players might scoff at somebody playing 4 hours, but somebody playing 4 hours might literally be dedicating every minute they can to the game. But then you might have some people who just want to play a game for, you know, maybe like an hour every night, and they will be the sort of true casuals, if you will. Maybe they'll play for 2 hours on one night, 1 hour on another, maybe 4 hours at the weekend. You know, they're just trying to extract fun from it without putting in a lot of effort. And then on the hardcore spectrum, you can actually be sort of hardcore with 4 hours a night. If you're spending all of your time learning about a game, you'll probably have some kind of like influence and be, you know, chasing that power. But we all know that in some video games, there will be people who will literally play 12 hours a day, maybe even 16 hours a day when things are really pumping, maybe even more than that because they'll actually sacrifice sleep when the game launches. And there's a wider question here is, how do you balance these people in video games? Especially in MMO. If you play something like League of Legends, then it's balanced by how good are you. And typically the people who play more will be better, but not necessarily. You could be the god gamer Faker, and I bet you if Faker just played 3 hours a night, he'd still be much better than me if I played 10 hours a day. So I think one element of this is going to be skill. And then there's a whole dynamic, which I'm not going to go into today, about how time and skill sort of relate, or should they not relate in an MMO. I think a lot of people play MMOs because they just want to be able to out-time other people, out-grind other people, put in the effort, as they will say, and get the rewards. And then there's other people who still want that feeling of a shared social experience, questing, progression, all that jazz, who actually want skill to be the deciding factor in a fight. The reality is, in an MMO, it's generally some kind of combination between the two. And I think Ashes of Creation, though, is sort of leaning more towards the time investment. That's not to say there's not going to be any skill, but we know that the leveling experience is anticipated to be anywhere from like 250 hours or a little bit more. From a casual point of view, if you do 2 hours a night, that's like 4 months of playing 2 hours a night every single day. which might be all that they can invest. So I think this game is leaning more towards a time investment, and that's fine because sometimes that then makes the game feel more rewarding. I'm personally playing a game like New World at the minute, and New World sort of gives you most of things quite easily, and we have the situation where it's sort of feeling quite unrewarding because there's not really much reason to do anything. So I'm very much aware of that juxtaposition, that pull and push between those two things. My last couple of videos have been talking about the Ashes of Creation node system and whether or not casuals will be having that much of an impact. The way that Stephen talks about it has me a little bit worried, to be honest with you. I don't think casuals want to be a pleb en masse. What they don't want and what I wouldn't want is to be sort of not valued for who I am, but to be valued for my quantity. You don't want to be completely irrelevant. You want to be some kind of significant part. Now, that's not to say you have to be the hero saving the world, but if you don't feel valued, you will generally stop playing. The node system, in honesty, is going to be controlled mainly by large guilds. So will the caravan system, so will the open world raids and all that kind of stuff. And I know some of you will be like, well, that's the way it should be. You should be forced to group because this is a social MMO. But just because you play 2 hours a day doesn't necessarily mean you are the kind of player who wants to play solo. Nor does it necessarily mean you're the kind of player who doesn't want a PvP in the open world. We sort of have this equation that casuals are the Kerbers and the hardcore are the PvPers. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think sometimes some people think someone is being a PvE Kerber when the reality is they're just a casual player who is living a normal life, having a job, a family, and they don't have the time to invest as much as they do, but they still want to have fun. Now, will Ashes of Creation offer that? Well, there's a couple of things that suggest it might. One thing that I do think is very important is actually the rate of progression. Can a casual player ever catch up to a hardcore player? And if not, then the casual player again might think, why bother? But then if you do let the casual player ever catch up to the hardcore player will be like, well, why did I put in all that time? That's a whole conversation about vertical and horizontal progression, which let's not talk about too much here. But if you're a casual, what can you do? Well, of course, you'll want to gear and progress like everybody else. But let's say you get to the end game. What are you looking to do there? Well, as Stephen said, you can play as a foot soldier, joining in with contributing to nodes, doing the quests in a specific area that you want to see improved. There's no harm there. That all makes sense. You can also do some interesting things. I think you can even run like a tavern in Ashes of Creation. We know that there's the Bard class. If you want to like role play and be some kind of character in the game, of course you can do that. You might be able to play the market. It sounds like Ashes of Creation is going to have a vast economy, and I wouldn't be surprised if individuals can actually make moves in that economy. If you can find the right niche, then you might be able to make a lot of coin. Obviously, not every casual player wants that, but it's definitely something out there. I'm sure, for example, there'll be people who all group together as gatherers and crafters. Maybe you could just be a crafter in your guild, helping them win the war without actually being one of the forefronted war people. Or, as I said, you could probably just play as a foot soldier. Wars are going to be massive. If you're somebody who can listen, vaguely follow instructions, then you probably can participate. You might not be making decisions about the nodes directly. You might never be a mayor, but you can probably have some kind of impact. If you like PvP, there's 2 obvious paths that you could go down if you wanted. You could become a bounty hunter. I mean, the problem is if you're going to be a bounty hunter and you're a casual player, you might come against hardcore players who are the PvPers. And then if you're not geared or skilled enough to beat them, you're not really doing too much, but maybe you could join like a bounty hunting squad. Or you could be that criminal if you wanted to be. You could be a naughty boy, killing people when they don't want it. You could even do that on the seas, be a pirate. The key thing with the casual playstyle is that it will be harder to do the top end content. The likelihood is that the casual players will not be the ones who are on the forefront of cutting edge progression, simply because the hardcore player is more likely to be selected or more likely to be in a position where that they can attend those. And that's not necessarily a problem. The key thing is whether or not a casual feels rewarded for their time. And actually being rewarded for your time is the problem that we all have. If casuals are no different from the hardcore, then the hardcore will start wondering, why are they playing this game when they're not really feeling any benefit from the time that they invest? But if casuals feel like that they are always behind and they're not really valued, they're not really a factor in anything major, then they'll just feel, why bother? Some people get this idea that there's just sort of like 2 players. Hardcore PvPers, cutting edge grinders, and then there's casual Kerbers who barely play the game who want everything for free. The reality is much more nuanced than that. There's obviously a big grey bar in between. Let's just hope that that grey bar is wide enough and big enough that everybody can fit in it. My worry right now with what I see about Ashes of Creation is that the casual players are going to feel like that there's no point actually contributing at all. And as Steven said, they are the majority of players. I think an old school MMO, as Narc says, as other people say, is actually still sought after because of what it offers and what the rewards are. And if casuals feel like they're still contributing and they're having fun, then they'll play the game. But I would say I am concerned that the people who don't like PvP, and you can call them Kerbers if you want to do that, that's fine. And the people who don't want to be spending, 12 hours a day in the game might simply not pick Ashes of Creation. And for some of you, you'll be like, well, we don't need those players, F them, I don't care about them. However, there's a lot of people in that category, and I think it's important not to ignore that. Ashes of Creation isn't going to be a game for everybody, and that will probably, on some level, reduce its potential max popularity. That doesn't mean the game will die or be very, very niche, but it is something we need to consider. Let me know your thoughts on this one. A bit of a rambly topic, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Big shout out to my Patreons. If you want to come and talk to me about any of this stuff, come and talk to me on Twitch. Worth noting, at the minute, I am still playing New World, but I'm going to play other games like PAX Day, etc. So come and talk to me. Obviously, I do have an Alpha 2 key, so when Ashes of Creation comes out, I'll be, pumping quite hard. For now, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.